going on, guys, and welcome to the Movie Dive. Today we're going to be doing our top 5 worst and top 5 best films of 2023. Which movies made the list? We'll find out now. All right, guys, what's up? I'm with Matthew Gosling here. He is out in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. I'm going to go ahead and get to our top 5. Again, first, it's going to be me. I'm going to say my top 5 worst, and he's going to say his top 5 worst, and my top 5 best is top 5 best so far down. And let's go ahead and get to number 5. So my number 5 worst film of the year is Freelance. The only reason this is not higher is because I laughed so much at the stupidity of this movie, but it was written by ChatGPT. I feel like actually every one of these movies on this list is probably written by ChatGPT. How did they get John Cena to be in this movie? I do recommend everyone to see it. It's like one of those where, like, if you do edibles, to eat an edible and watch. It was like The Happening with Mark Wahlberg, where you're just like, this has to be done on purpose.
Yeah, my 5th worst was Leave the World Behind. So I think it was like a really interesting premise for a story, and this indecent build up didn't actually go anywhere meaningful. Sam Esmail wrote and directed it, and he did Mr. Robot, so I was expecting a lot more. So the world's ending, who knew?
All right, my number 5 best on the list. This, I would say 6 months ago, would not have been here, but has grown on me so much, and that would be Barbie. I have revisited this movie. It's just so funny. The singing scene with Ryan Gosling, the musical part towards the end, I think is Oscar worthy. There's still stuff that I cringe at while watching it. However, it's so rewatchable that it does make my top 5, and it is at number 5.
My number 5 is May, December. My skin was just crawling the entire time. Amazing performances from Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore. The tension between those two was really unsettling, so I really enjoyed that.
All right, my number 4 worst film of the year. My God, stop making these Fast X. There's the scene at the beginning of the movie where they're driving through Rome, and it's like a car chase scene with like this humongous boulder from Indiana Jones, but it's like going on for 45 minutes. There's almost the same chase scene in Mission Impossible, the new one that came out. The difference, I wish people just watch those two scenes, and the difference between someone who truly cares about good action and someone who just wants to throw shit in there to throw shit in there. That's Fast X. So yeah, that's my number 4 worst of the year.
My 4th worst of the year, again, kind of like mirrors yours, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Yeah.
Huge budget and absolutely terrible and way too long. Very weird plot. Mads Mikkelsen was a great villain, but that's really the only saving grace I found.
Number 4 best movie of the year for me is Iron Claw, the one I just saw recently. This movie is tremendous. If I would have been able to see it again, it might be higher on the list. So I didn't know anything about the story of the Von Erichs, but the first hour, I was like, dang, this is such a cool sports wrestling movie. And then the last hour is just depression after depression. It still does it with a really cool message. Last year, The Whale came out. I did like that movie, but it felt like it was like sad porn. Like they were just forcing sadness upon you. This one was so much more subtle. It was way more of a realistic type feel. So yeah, my number 4 is Iron Claw. And once again, Zac Efron has to be number 2, I think, for best actor of the year.
Number 4 for me, The Holdovers. Really enjoyable. Explored very human themes without getting melodramatic. Because you see some movies, either period set or character driven stuff, and it just gets really saccharine and overwritten. I think they just let the actors do their thing, let the script breathe. Just a beautiful way to produce and write a movie. So you say Zac Efron, I raise you Paul Giamatti.
All right, guys. Well, number 3. My number 3 worst film of the year. People need to stop defending this shit. The Marvels. There's maybe 10 minutes of this movie where they have something going for it, where all 3 of the characters have this good banter between each other. When they go off to some planet where it turns into a weird sing-along. And that scene was supposed to be 45 minutes long, and the studio made it cut it down to 15 minutes, which made it even worse because then you're like, where is this coming from? And then suddenly the planet gets attacked and nothing else happens of it. So yeah, The Marvels is my number 3.
My number 3 worst is Elemental. Huge swing and a miss from Pixar. And I know that Inside Out 2 is coming out, but I just feel like they're running out of ideas. And to talk about ChatGPT written script and characters, and huge letdown from Elemental, and I'm kind of worried about Inside Out 2 now. So
all right, so my number 3 best film of the year, there you go, is The Holdovers. Same as you said, you kind of spoke about it. This movie is so good. On the second time watching it, it was even better because there's a lot of moments at the beginning of the film where the kid shows how much he wants to go to Boston, and you later find out why. So on rewatch, seeing how bad he wants to go there, and You're like, dang, that really hits home, the second time you watch it, and definitely with that sadness. And those two characters, Paul Giamatti, I forget the kid's name, but it's his first movie he's ever made, which is crazy. Great message in that movie. It's something I'll probably watch every year for Christmas, which will be The Holdovers at number three.
My number three is Killers of the Flower Moon.
God.
Scorsese is at his best to me when he's just like inflicting pain. I just thought this was just such a punishing movie. I hear what you say about like Leo. I'm not sure if his character was written out well enough for the screen, but everything else happening around it, I just think that it's really interesting that Scorsese is at the end of his career and like choosing to write these really damning portraits of the human condition. That's my number three, and I'm sorry.
Number two, worst film of the year. Congratulations, Marvel. You have another one. Ant-Man Quantumania. So dumb. They're building up this character, Kang, building this guy up as like this big bad villain. And they tell us that they're going to really introduce him in Ant-Man Quantumania. Oh, by the way, this is spoilers. Ant-Man defeats him with a pack of ants. So you lose all credibility that this guy could be any threat in the future of Marvel. Aside from that, the CGI was terrible. I didn't understand much of the story. It seemed like they were cutting corners. It was just an absurd movie. Something I'll never go back to. So yeah, you go ahead with your number two worst.
Number two worst is Pain Hustlers. I regretted this decision. This was just unwatchable almost. It was hot boiler trash. So yeah, number two, Pain Hustlers.
Number two, best film of the year for me will be Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. God, the animation in this movie is, I think, the best animation of all time, with a twist at the end that makes you want more. All the voice characters are perfectly cast. This is what the multiverse should be, and that's why it's my number two. I'll be rewatching it quite a bit. This was my number one for a long time, but terrific.
My number two is Rye Lane. I grew up in London and around a lot of the areas that this movie was shot in. The script was dynamite. It was so funny. The writing and the directing cues were taken from Spike Lee. So you got a lot of Fish Islands and some really great music choices as well. I'm a sucker for rom-coms, and I just thought it was just delightful. And Rye Lane, number two.
All right, number one. My number one worst film of the year, the only movie I walked out early from this year, which was Haunted Mansion. What a gobble of shit this movie was. I didn't know really what was happening. It just went from scene to scene. I don't even think kids liked it. I don't think adults liked it. This should have been a streaming movie during Halloween season. I walked out early from this movie because I just hated it so much, and that's my number one worst.
My number one worst is Rebel Moon, Part 1, A Child of Fire. I remember reading a review on it, and it said that Zack Snyder is a really good storyboard artist, not a good story writer. You know, you can see what he's trying to do with his vision, but no one should be giving this man $200 million for the first part of an installment that's going to go nowhere. It could have been like an hour and a half. There was so much slow-mo in it that it became 2.5 hours. A waste of original sci-fi. Awful writing, awful acting, looked terrible, looked like a PS2 game.
All right, so my number one best film of the year, that's Godzilla Minus One. This one is amazing. Every time that characters were on screen, I forgot it was a Godzilla movie because you were so invested in their life. Since this was post-World War II, the country was going through a bunch of shit. The inspiration from Jaws was done perfectly, and it's one I'll be watching quite a bit more and more.
My number one favorite of the year is Oppenheimer. I've watched it 3 times now and just feel like I'm picking up new elements each time. I haven't been moved and at the edge of my seat for a movie this year quite like that. So I'll watch it again tomorrow and I'll still love it as much. So number one, Oppenheimer. Again, I'm sorry.
All right, guys, that is the movie dive, and that is our top 5, bottom 5, worst and best of the year award for 2023. You guys let me know what your top 5, what your bottom 5s were, what your most anticipated for 2024 is. And please don't forget to subscribe, guys, down below, and we'll see you next time on the movie dive.